She grew up in a quiet town where everyone seemed to know everyone else. Life moved slowly there, and most people followed the same routines every day. The streets were narrow, lined with small houses, and the air always carried the smell of fresh bread from the bakery at the corner. She had always felt like she didn't quite belong, like a note in a song that didn't fit anywhere yet somehow still had a place. She was gentle, observant, and often spent her time alone, watching the world quietly. People in the town didn't pay much attention to her. She was just another girl, moving through life without making a sound. But there was something different about her. She had a secret that she held close to her heart, a small spark that made her world brighter than anyone else's. She loved music, not just any music, but the kind that touched the soul, the kind that could make someone stop in the middle of a busy day just to listen. She would hum softly to herself when she thought no one was looking, letting melodies drift through her mind like whispers of dreams she could not yet touch. Music was her companion, her refuge, and sometimes her only friend. Her first encounter with the piano was a moment she could never forget. She was only 7, and it happened in the corner of a dimly lit room in a friend's house. The piano was old, its wooden surface scratched and worn, its keys a little yellowed with age. She approached it hesitantly, unsure if she was allowed to touch it, but something inside her pulled her forward. She reached out and pressed a key. The sound that came out was uneven, slightly sharp, but it filled her with a strange warmth. She pressed another key, and then another, letting her small fingers wander across the keys without knowing what she was doing. And in that moment she felt a connection so strong it scared her. It was as if the piano understood her, as if it had been waiting for her all this time. After that day, she could not stop thinking about the piano. She begged her parents to let her take lessons, but they were practical people who worried about money and stability. Music is a hobby, not a future, her mother said gently. Focus on your studies first. Her father, tired from work, would nod silently, not saying much but clearly sharing her mother's concerns. She understood their worries, but her heart could not let go of the piano. She started saving every coin she could find, doing small chores for neighbors and sometimes sneaking small amounts from her allowance. She wanted just one lesson, just one chance to learn what the piano could teach her. At first, the lessons were difficult. Her fingers felt clumsy, refusing to move the way she wanted. Her teacher was strict and impatient, often correcting her harshly when she made mistakes. She felt embarrassed, frustrated, and at times ready to give up. But then something changed. One evening, after practicing in her tiny room while the rest of the house slept, she played a simple melody she had invented herself. It was rough, uneven, and not at all perfect, but when she finished, she felt a strange pride. She realized that even if the world did not understand her music, it was hers. She could express everything she felt, joy, sadness, hope, fear, through these keys, and no one could take that away from her. As years passed, her skill slowly grew. She spent hours each day practicing in secret, often hiding her sheets of music under her bed or behind a pile of books. She memorized every note, every rhythm, and every emotion that a piece could carry. The music became a language she spoke fluently. Even when words failed her, her parents began to notice her dedication. They did not always understand it, but they could see the change in her, the way her eyes lit up when she played, the calm that fell over her even after a difficult day. They started supporting her quietly, saving a little more money so she could afford better lessons, sometimes even skipping small luxuries so she could have music books or a worn-out piano bench. It was not much, but it was enough to keep her dream alive. She also discovered that music had a strange power over people. Sometimes, when she played quietly for herself, neighbors would pause in their routines and listen from outside her window. She could hear footsteps stop on the street, whispers of, "Who is that playing?" and even the soft sighs of people who had carried heavy hearts all day. It surprised her how music could reach people without needing words, how it could touch someone's soul and make them feel something they had almost forgotten. She began to understand that music was not just her escape. It could also be a gift to others if she was brave enough to share it. School was never easy for her. She was quiet, often lost in her thoughts, and her peers did not always understand her. Some teased her for being too serious, for spending hours alone, for always carrying a notebook filled with melodies and scribbles. She learned to ignore the laughter, to find strength in her music, and to remind herself that one day the world would see her differently. But there were moments when the teasing hurt. She would sit on a bench in the schoolyard, her notebook in her lap, and play a melody under her breath. The music became her shield, protecting her from the harshness of words she did not deserve. There were also moments of unexpected kindness. A few teachers noticed her dedication and encouraged her quietly. One music teacher, older and wise, gave her extra time after class to practice on the school's piano. "You have a gift," the teacher said one day, watching her fingers fly across the keys. "Never let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words stayed with her even on the days when she felt small and unseen. She held on to them like a lifeline, reminding herself that her music mattered, even if the world had not yet recognized it. Her life outside music was simple, but filled with small joys. She loved to watch the rain fall on the streets, listen to the birds singing in the morning, and walk through the fields near her house, imagining melodies in her head. Every sound became part of her music. The soft patter of rain, a gentle rhythm; the wind through the trees, a delicate harmony; the chatter of people in the market, a chaotic melody she learned to arrange in her mind. Music was everywhere, and she learned to see the world as one great symphony waiting for her to play her part. One day when she was 12, something remarkable happened. The town announced a small local talent show, meant for children and teenagers to display their skills. She hesitated. She had never performed in front of anyone except for a few teachers and neighbors who had listened quietly from outside her window. The thought of people staring at her, judging her, laughing at her mistakes made her stomach twist with fear. But then she remembered the power she had felt in her music, the way it could touch hearts without words. She decided to enter, not for fame, not for praise, but for the chance to let her music speak. The day of the talent show arrived, and she stood behind the curtain, her small hands trembling as she waited for her turn. She could hear the noise of the audience, the chatter of children, the laughter of parents. Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to run, to hide, to forget the piano altogether. But then she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and thought of the melodies that had lived in her heart for years. She imagined them flowing through her fingers, filling the room, reaching every corner, every ear, every heart. And in that moment, the fear began to melt away, replaced by a quiet, steady courage. When she finally stepped onto the stage, she felt a strange calm. The piano was there, waiting for her, as if it had known this day would come. She sat down, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. At first, the notes were soft, almost hesitant, but as she continued, they grew stronger, more confident, more alive. She played with everything she had, her joy, her sadness, her dreams, her fears. The audience grew silent. Parents stopped talking. Children stopped fidgeting. And even the teachers leaned forward, captivated by the music that seemed to pour from her soul. For the first time, she realized something incredible. Her music could make the world stop and listen. It could hold people's attention, make them feel, make them think. And in that moment, she knew that this was only the beginning. The piano was not just an instrument. It was her voice, her story, her heart made audible. And no matter what happened next, she would never stop playing. After the talent show, her life seemed to change, but not in the way she had imagined. The applause and smiles had filled her heart with warmth, but the outside world did not suddenly become easy. Some people admired her courage and skill, but others whispered behind her back, questioning why she spent so much time on music instead of studying or doing something practical. At school, a few classmates who had ignored her before now tried to compete for attention, teasing her with jokes about her fancy piano playing or calling her a show-off. At first, their words stung. She would go home, close the door to her small room, and press her face into her hands, feeling frustrated and alone. Despite this, she could not stop playing. The piano had become more than just an instrument. It was her lifeline. Every note she played reminded her of the joy she had felt the first time she sat at the keys. Music had become her way of understanding the world, a way of expressing the emotions she could not put into words. When she played, the teasing, the doubts, and the worries of the day seemed to disappear. She practiced longer than ever, sometimes into the night, her small room filled with melodies that carried both her pain and her hope. Her parents watched quietly. They had begun to notice how serious she had become, how her small, gentle personality was slowly transforming into someone stronger and more determined. But they also worried. They understood that the world could be harsh, and they feared their daughter might face disappointment or heartbreak if she relied too much on her music. "Don't forget your studies," her mother reminded her gently one evening. Music is beautiful, but it won't always protect you. She nodded politely, understanding her mother's concern, but inside, she felt a fire that could not be dimmed. Music was not just a hobby, it was her purpose. She began searching for ways to improve. She read everything she could find about music, devoured books on famous composers, and listened to recordings again and again, trying to understand the emotions behind every note. She experimented with new melodies, sometimes staying up late, scribbling music into notebooks filled with pages of careful symbols and markings. The piano became a mirror for her soul, reflecting her thoughts, her struggles, and her dreams in ways that words never could. Yet challenges kept coming. One day she learned of a music competition in a nearby city, one that promised recognition and even a small scholarship. She was thrilled at the idea, but when she told her parents, their faces grew serious. "It's far," her father said. "It will cost money and you will need to stay there for days. Are you sure it's worth it?" She tried to explain how important it was, how she had worked for this moment, but they hesitated. Money was tight and they feared disappointment more than failure. Still, her persistence won them over. They scraped together the funds and she packed a small bag, her favorite notebook and her worn shoes, ready to take her music into the wider world. Arriving at the competition was overwhelming. The hall was massive, with polished floors, bright lights, and an audience filled with people she did not know. Everywhere she looked, she saw other young musicians with expensive instruments, formal outfits, and polished performances. She felt a wave of nervousness, questioning if she truly belonged here. Her hands shook as she adjusted her sleeves and approached the piano. For a moment, fear nearly held her back. She remembered her parents' faces, the long nights of practice, and the first time she had felt music move her heart. Drawing in a deep breath, she sat down and let her fingers find the keys. Her first notes were cautious, soft, almost hesitant, but as she continued, something shifted. The hall seemed to quiet itself. She poured all her emotions into the music, her frustration, her hope, her dreams, her fears, and the sound that came from the piano was alive. People leaned forward in their seats, listening, unable to look away. She could see some faces soften, some eyes widen, and even a few adults blink back tears. She realized that the music was speaking not just for her, but for everyone in the room, telling a story of persistence, of dreams, and of courage. After her performance, there was silence, a heavy, thoughtful silence that seemed to stretch for moments too long. Then applause erupted. It was not the polite clapping of the crowd, but a warm, heartfelt reaction from people who had been moved by something true and beautiful. Judges whispered to each other, some nodding in surprise, and she felt a swell of pride that was almost too big for her chest. For the first time, she understood that her music could break through barriers, touch hearts, and make people see her not as a quiet girl in a small town, but as someone with a gift that deserved to be shared. Even with this recognition, the path forward was not simple. Some competitors were jealous, whispering behind her back, spreading rumors and trying to downplay her performance. Teachers from other schools suggested that she should focus on simpler pieces, that her style was too emotional or unpolished. There were moments when she doubted herself, when she wondered if the struggle was worth it, if the world was really ready for her music. But she kept returning to the piano, sitting down, closing her eyes and letting the music flow. Every note reminded her why she had started, why she had persisted, and why she could never stop. She also learned that talent alone was not enough. She needed patience, discipline, and resilience. Some days she would practice for hours without producing anything that felt right, and the frustration threatened to overwhelm her. There were times when her fingers ached, when her back hurt from sitting too long, and when she questioned whether all the hard work would pay off. Yet each time she felt herself faltering, she remembered the faces in the competition hall, the soft tears of people moved by her music, and the quiet satisfaction she felt when a melody finally came together. It was proof that her struggle had meaning, that persistence could lead to beauty, and that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. During this period, she also met people who helped her grow. A retired musician who had once performed in great concert halls noticed her dedication and offered guidance. He did not promise fame or fortune, but he taught her to listen deeply, to feel every note, and to let the music express what words could not. His mentorship was gentle but firm, pushing her to explore emotions she had never shared, to play pieces that challenged her, and to find her own voice rather than simply imitating others. Under his guidance, she began to understand that music was more than technique. It was a conversation between her heart and the world. Despite these small victories, life outside music continued to be complicated. Schoolwork, family responsibilities, and the opinions of others often pulled her attention away from the piano. Friends came and went, some supportive, some indifferent, and some openly critical. She learned to balance her life carefully, carving out time for music even when everything else seemed to demand her focus. Each challenge became a lesson, each disappointment a chance to grow, and each small success a reminder of why she could not give up. One evening, after a long day of practice and school, she walked through her town, letting the cool air settle over her. She passed familiar streets and shops, noticing the way the world continued without pause. Yet, in her mind, melodies played constantly, weaving through her thoughts, turning ordinary moments into something extraordinary. A child laughed nearby, a dog barked, and she imagined these sounds joining with her music, creating harmonies that belonged only to her. It reminded her that even in a world that often felt indifferent or harsh, beauty could be found, and she had the power to bring it forward. By the end of this period, she had begun to understand something crucial. Talent alone was not enough to succeed. The world could be difficult, full of skepticism, jealousy, and indifference. Yet persistence, courage, and the willingness to keep playing despite setbacks could change everything. She had tasted both the bitterness of doubt and the sweetness of recognition, and each experience shaped her into someone stronger, more determined, and more capable of touching the hearts of others. Her music was no longer just a secret kept in the quiet corners of her room. It had begun to ripple outward, reaching people she would never meet, leaving impressions that could last a lifetime. And though challenges still lay ahead, she knew that her journey had only begun. Every note she played, every melody she created, brought her closer to something greater, a chance to let the world truly listen and understand the depth of her heart. And so, she continued. Each day she sat at the piano, fingers trembling at first, then moving with growing confidence. She practiced, she dreamed, and she persisted. She knew there would be obstacles, moments of doubt, and people who would not believe in her, but she had discovered something far more powerful than fear. A passion that could not be silenced, a talent that could not be ignored, and a music that had the ability to make the world stop, even for a moment, just to listen. The day she stepped into the grand concert hall, she felt a mix of excitement and fear like never before. The building was massive, with walls of polished wood that reflected light in every direction. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, sparkling as if they were alive. She had never seen a place like this, not even in the city she had visited for competitions before. Her heart beat faster, and her palms felt sweaty as she walked down the corridor leading to the stage. Each step echoed in her ears, reminding her of everything she had worked for and everything she had yet to face. Backstage, other musicians were preparing. They wore elegant dresses, polished shoes, and confident smiles that made her feel small and unsure. Some were whispering to each other, laughing quietly at things she couldn't hear, but she could feel their judgment. She remembered all the teasing from school, the doubts from adults, and the countless hours she had spent alone practicing. She wondered if she truly belonged here, if her music would be good enough, if the world was ready to listen. For a moment she considered stepping back, leaving the hall, and pretending this day had never come. But then she closed her eyes and thought of the piano waiting for her. The piano was magnificent, a grand instrument that seemed to demand respect. Its black surface gleamed under the bright lights, and the keys shone like tiny white tiles ready to tell a story. She approached it slowly, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the keys. She remembered every lesson she had ever had, every mistake she had made, and every melody she had written in secret notebooks. She reminded herself that the music was hers, that no one could take it away, and that she had a voice worth sharing. Taking a deep breath, she sat down, feeling the smooth wood beneath her and the keys under her fingers. The audience was already seated, their chatter filling the hall. Some were friends of performers, some were critics, and some were simply curious spectators. She could feel their eyes, their judgments, their expectations. The noise pressed down on her, making her heart race. But as she began to play the first few notes, something extraordinary happened. The room started to change. The chatter softened, heads turned toward the piano, and a quiet stillness settled over the hall. It was as if the music had a power of its own, commanding attention, asking everyone to listen. She began with a slow, gentle melody, one she had composed herself, inspired by the quiet streets of her town and the dreams she had carried for years. Her fingers moved carefully at first, then with growing confidence. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her soul, telling a story of hope, struggle, and courage. She could see some faces in the audience soften, some eyes widen, and even a few adults lean forward, captivated by the sound. She had felt music touch her own heart countless times, but seeing it reach others was almost overwhelming. As she continued, the melody grew stronger and more complex. She poured everything into it, her fears, her joy, her dreams, and the years of loneliness she had endured. The hall seemed to hold its breath. She could hear the soft rustle of programs, the gentle shifting of people in their seats, and the quiet hum of anticipation. But the music did not stop. It flowed freely, carrying emotion with it. Some in the audience had tears in their eyes. Some were nodding as if understanding something they could not explain. And some simply stared, amazed by the power of what they were hearing. She did not notice the time passing. Hours of practice, years of persistence, and countless small victories had led to this moment. And she was fully present in the music. Each chord she played felt alive, resonating not just through the room but through her very being. She could feel her heartbeat syncing with the rhythm, her breath matching the rise and fall of the melody. It was as if the piano had become a part of her body, an extension of her thoughts and feelings. For the first time, she understood that music could be more than sound. It could be a bridge between souls, a language that everyone could understand without a single word. Midway through the performance, a sudden shift in the music came naturally. She had learned to let her emotions guide her fingers, and the melody evolved into something richer and deeper. She remembered her parents quietly saving money for lessons, the kind words of her teacher, and the whispers of encouragement from neighbors who had once stopped to listen outside her window. All of it flowed through her fingertips, and the hall seemed to respond. The lights reflected off the polished wood of the piano, the chandeliers sparkled like stars, and the audience leaned closer, hanging on every note. She felt a strange connection with the people watching her. She did not know their names, their stories, or their struggles, but she could feel them. Each note she played seemed to speak directly to someone in the audience, offering comfort, hope, and understanding. A man in the front row held a tissue to his face, wiping away tears. A young girl clutched her mother's hand, eyes wide with wonder. An older woman leaned forward, listening intently as if she could remember her own youth and dreams. Music had become more than a performance, it was a conversation, and she was the storyteller. At the end of the piece, she allowed the final notes to linger in the air, soft and gentle, like a whisper of something fragile yet powerful. For a moment, the hall was completely silent, the kind of silence that holds a heartbeat. Then slowly applause began, starting as a ripple and growing into a wave. It was thunderous, heartfelt, and unrelenting. She sat there, hands still on the keys, listening to the sound of appreciation, amazement, and respect. Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear or relief, but from a deep, overwhelming sense of fulfillment. After leaving the stage, she felt different. She had faced the largest audience of her life, shared her music with the world, and found that it could touch hearts in ways she had never imagined. People came up to her, praising her talent, asking how she had learned to play with such emotion, and telling her how deeply her music had moved them. Some were critics who had expected a young girl to be timid or unskilled, and now they were nodding in admiration, taking notes, and whispering among themselves about her potential. She realized that the world could be kind, that talent could shine even in places where doubt once lingered. Despite the applause and recognition, she remained humble. She knew that this was just one step on a long journey. There would be more competitions, more performances, and more challenges ahead. She had learned that the world could be harsh and judgmental, but it could also be moved and inspired by something genuine. She had also discovered that her music was not just about notes and technique, it was about courage, persistence, and honesty. Every time she played, she was sharing a piece of herself, and that was more important than anything else. That evening, after returning to her small room in a nearby hotel, she sat quietly at the bedside, her hands still tingling from the performance. She thought of the people who had cheered for her, the faces that had been moved, and the emotions that had been shared without words. For the first time, she truly understood the power of music. It could break barriers, bring strangers together, and create moments of pure connection. She felt a deep sense of responsibility, not a burden but a calling. Her music could touch lives, and she had to continue no matter how difficult the path might become. The experience also taught her something else. Confidence does not come from perfection. She had made small mistakes during the performance, moments where her fingers slipped or the sound was not exactly what she imagined. But the audience had not noticed, or if they did not care. They had listened to her heart, to the emotion behind each note, and that was what mattered most. She realized that people do not need flawless skill to be moved. They need honesty, courage, and sincerity. Her music had been imperfect, yes, but it had been real, and that was why it had resonated so deeply. As she prepared for sleep that night, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The quiet mornings in her room, the long hours of practice, the whispered encouragement of a teacher, the small moments of triumph and defeat, they had all shaped her. She understood that every challenge she had faced was not a setback but a lesson, every doubt a chance to grow stronger, and every small victory a reminder of why she had begun. The world could be difficult, but she had learned that she could face it, one note at a time, with courage and determination. She also began to dream bigger. The Grand Hall had been only the beginning. There were more stages, more audiences, more opportunities to share her music with the world. She imagined cities she had never visited, people she had never met, and hearts she had never touched. And in each dream, the piano was always there, waiting for her fingers to bring it to life. She knew that the journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but she was ready. She had discovered the truth that music could transcend fear, doubt, and even the limitations of her small town. That night, as she drifted to sleep, she felt a quiet certainty. She was no longer just the quiet girl from the small town. She was a musician, a storyteller, and someone whose music could make the world pause, listen, and feel. She knew there would be obstacles ahead, times of uncertainty, and moments when she would question herself again. But she also knew that the piano would always be there, a companion, a teacher, and a bridge to the hearts of others. And no matter what happened next, she was ready to play, to share, and to let the music carry her forward. After her performance in the Grand Hall, her life began to shift in ways she could not have imagined. News of her music traveled slowly at first, whispered among people who had been moved by the performance. Some spoke of the quiet girl from a small town whose fingers seemed to weave magic across the piano keys. Others shared stories online, in small articles, and through social media posts. Soon invitations arrived from other competitions, from music schools, and even from local television programs. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. The world seemed bigger than ever before, and she realized that her music could reach far beyond the small town she had always known. Despite the growing attention, she remained humble. She remembered the long hours spent in her tiny room, practicing until her fingers ached, and the quiet moments of doubt when she wondered if anyone would ever understand her music. She knew that recognition could be fleeting, and she did not want it to change who she was. Instead, she focused on her craft, practicing diligently, exploring new melodies, and learning to convey deeper emotions through her music. Each note she played carried a piece of herself, a story of perseverance, hope, and the quiet power that had always lived within her. As her reputation grew, she encountered a variety of people. Some were supportive and encouraging, recognizing her talent and passion. They offered guidance, advice, and opportunities to perform in places she had never imagined. Others, however, were critical, jealous, or dismissive. They questioned whether she could handle the pressure, whether her style was too emotional or unrefined. At first, these words stung. She remembered the teasing in school, the skepticism of her first teachers, and the moments when she had doubted herself. But she realized that criticism was not always meant to harm. It could be a way to push her further, to challenge her to grow. She learned to listen carefully, take what was helpful, and let go of negativity. One of her first major opportunities after the Grand Hall came in the form of a citywide concert, organized by a local music academy. The audience was diverse: students, teachers, critics, and music lovers from all walks of life. She felt a familiar nervousness, the same feeling she had experienced at her first competition and the Grand Hall performance. But this time she also felt confidence. She had learned that fear was natural, but it did not have to control her. Taking a deep breath, she approached the piano, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. Her music flowed with ease, each note carrying her experiences, dreams, and emotions. She noticed that the audience responded immediately, leaning forward in their seats, eyes fixed on her hands as they moved across the keys. Some faces softened, some brightened, and others seemed lost in thought, as if the music had reached places within them they had long forgotten. She had learned that music could speak directly to the heart, bypassing words, explanations, and judgments. And in that moment, she felt a deep sense of connection, not just with her audience, but with herself. After the performance, she was approached by a few people who had influence in the music world. One of them, a retired concert pianist, spoke to her quietly but earnestly. "You have something rare," he said. "Not just skill, but the ability to touch hearts. That is a gift that cannot be taught. Protect it, nurture it, and share it wisely." His words stayed with her, a reminder that her music was more than technique. It was a way to connect, to inspire, and to make a difference. She realized that the journey ahead would be challenging, but that it also had the potential to be meaningful in ways she had never imagined. As invitations and opportunities continued to arrive, she began to travel more frequently. She visited cities she had only seen in books, small towns that reminded her of home, and concert halls that seemed larger than life. Each performance was different, each audience unique. She learned to adapt, to feel the room, and to let the music respond to the people listening. Sometimes her pieces moved people to tears. Other times they inspired laughter, reflection, or quiet contemplation. She realized that the power of music was not just in the notes themselves, but in the emotions they carried and the connections they created. While her growing reputation brought excitement, it also brought challenges. She had to manage travel, performance schedules, and the pressure to meet expectations. She sometimes felt exhausted, unsure if she could continue performing at her best. But each time she faced these moments of doubt, she returned to the piano, remembering why she had begun. The music was not just a path to recognition or success. It was a way to express herself, to share her story, and to bring comfort or joy to others. That understanding gave her strength, reminding her that her purpose was greater than temporary challenges. Her journey also inspired others. Young musicians, especially girls from small towns, began to reach out, sharing their admiration and asking for advice. She responded gently, encouraging them to practice, to trust their instincts, and to never let fear or doubt silence their dreams. She remembered how lonely it had felt to pursue music in the early days, how she had sometimes believed no one could understand her, and now she had the opportunity to show others that persistence, courage, and dedication could make a difference. One day, after a particularly moving performance, she received a letter from a family who had been in the audience. They described how her music had helped their child overcome fear, sadness, and uncertainty. They wrote about how the melodies had brought comfort during difficult times, creating a memory that would last a lifetime. She read the letter slowly, her fingers trembling, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time, she realized that her music could not only move people in the moment, but also leave a lasting impact on their lives. That realization filled her with a deep sense of purpose and joy. Despite her growing fame, she remained grounded. She returned often to her small town, walking the familiar streets, visiting the bakery, and sitting quietly near the fields where she had once imagined melodies in her head. These moments reminded her of where she had come from, of the struggles, small victories, and quiet determination that had brought her to this point. She understood that no matter how far she traveled, the music she carried inside her would always be tied to her beginnings, the small room, the old piano, and the countless hours of practice that had shaped her into who she was. Her music also began to attract the attention of media and critics. Articles were written, interviews conducted, and recordings shared online. Some praised her talent, her passion, and the emotional depth of her performances. Others critiqued her style, suggesting she should focus on more popular or marketable pieces. At first, the criticism stung. She remembered how easy it had been to feel small and invisible in school and in her early competitions, but she quickly realized that criticism could not define her. She had learned to trust herself, to play for the love of music, and to value the connections her music created above all else. The recognition also brought personal growth. She learned to manage expectations, handle pressure, and balance her life. She became more disciplined, careful about how she prepared for performances, and thoughtful about the choices she made in her music. She continued to study, practice, and explore, always looking for ways to deepen her understanding and expression. Each performance became an opportunity, not just to showcase her talent, but to share a part of herself with the world. One of the most profound moments came during a performance in a small, crowded concert hall in another city. The audience was modest, mostly people who had come simply because they loved music. But the connection she felt with them was extraordinary. Every note seemed to resonate with the listeners, their faces reflecting emotions she could not put into words. After the final chord, a woman approached her, tears in her eyes, and said, "Your music reminds me of my childhood, of dreams I thought I had lost. Thank you." That single statement reminded her why she played, why she had persevered, and why music was more than sound. It was a lifeline, a bridge, and a gift. As the days turned into months, she began to realize that her music had become something larger than herself. It was no longer only about her talent, her struggles, or her personal journey. It had the power to inspire, comfort, and transform. People reached out to her, not just for her skill, but for the emotions and hope her music carried. She felt a deep responsibility to continue, to share her gift widely, and to remain true to the passion that had always guided her. She also learned to appreciate the small moments amidst the growing recognition. Walking quietly through a park, listening to the wind, or watching children play reminded her of the simple joys that had inspired her first melodies. Each experience became a part of her music, adding depth, authenticity, and emotion to her performances. She understood that the beauty of music lay not only in its technical perfection, but in its ability to capture the human experience, its joys, sorrows, and quiet triumphs. Through it all, she remained herself. The quiet girl from a small town had become a musician whose music touched countless hearts, but she never forgot the early days, the secret practice sessions, the doubts, and the encouragement she had received along the way. Her journey had taught her that success was not measured by fame or recognition alone, but by the impact she could have on others, the courage to keep pursuing her dreams, and the integrity to remain true to herself. And so, her music continued to grow, reaching further, touching more hearts, and inspiring others to follow their own paths. She knew that the journey was far from over, that challenges and doubts would return, but she was ready. Every note she played carried the lessons of her past, the hope of her present, and the promise of her future. Her music had become a part of the world, and she had become a part of it too, not as someone seeking validation, but as a storyteller, a dreamer, and a musician whose melodies could make the world pause, reflect, and feel. Years had passed since the quiet girl from a small town first touched a piano, and now she looked back on her journey with a mix of wonder and gratitude. Her life had changed in ways she had never imagined, but the essence of who she was remained the same. She was still the same dreamer who had once sat alone in her small room, scribbling melodies in a notebook and imagining that one day the world might listen. But now, that dream had grown far beyond the walls of her room, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. Her music had become her language, and through it, she spoke to countless hearts. She had traveled to cities and towns she had only once dreamed of seeing. Each performance brought new faces, new stories, and new emotions. Yet no matter how far she went, she always carried the lessons of her past with her. The long hours of practice, the struggles of being underestimated, and the quiet courage it took to keep playing when no one was watching. Those memories were her foundation, a reminder of where she had come from and why she played in the first place. She had learned that music was more than sound. It was a bridge, a connection between people who might never meet, yet shared a moment together through a melody. She remembered a performance in a small town where the audience was filled with children who had never seen a piano before. As she played, she noticed their eyes widening, their mouths opening in silent awe. After the performance, they crowded around asking questions, touching the piano keys, and trying to mimic the sounds she had created. She smiled, remembering how she had once been that curious child, feeling a world of possibility open before her. That day she realized that her music could inspire others to find their own voices. Her journey had not been without challenges. Fame and recognition brought pressures she had never faced in her quiet hometown. She traveled constantly, performing in unfamiliar places, adjusting to new pianos, new audiences, and new expectations. There were moments when exhaustion set in, when the weight of deadlines, competitions, and performances made her question whether she could continue. She remembered nights when her hands ached from practice, when her mind felt heavy with doubt, and when she longed for the simplicity of her small room and the comfort of practicing alone. Yet, each time she faced these moments, she returned to the piano, reminded that music was not just her career, it was her purpose. Her parents had watched her grow with pride, sometimes with worry. They had witnessed the long hours of practice, the small disappointments, and the great triumphs. They had seen their quiet daughter become someone whose music could stop a room, whose melodies could make strangers feel deeply, and whose determination could inspire anyone willing to listen. They often said that they had only wanted her to be happy, but now they understood that her happiness came from sharing her gift, from letting her music reach beyond the boundaries of their small town. Along the way, she met other musicians, teachers, and mentors who influenced her growth. Some challenged her, pushing her to explore deeper emotions and more complex compositions. Others encouraged her, reminding her to stay true to her own voice, to honor the passion that had always guided her. She realized that every encounter, every conversation, and every lesson contributed to her journey. She had learned to listen, not only to the music she created, but to the world around her, to the people who supported her, and to the quiet wisdom within herself. Her music began to reach beyond live performances. Recordings of her playing were shared online, spreading to people who could not attend concerts or competitions. She received letters and messages from strangers who shared how her music had touched their lives. One message stood out. A teacher from a distant country wrote that her music had helped students through a difficult time, inspiring them to pursue their own passions. Another came from a soldier far from home, who said that listening to her melodies reminded him of family, peace, and hope. These messages humbled her and reminded her that music could be a comfort and a companion, even in places she could never visit. Despite recognition and admiration, she remained grounded. She continued to practice daily, often returning to the simple exercises and melodies that had first shaped her skill. She remembered the feeling of the old piano in her first lessons, the quiet moments of discovery, and the thrill of creating a melody from nothing. Those moments reminded her that the foundation of her journey was not applause, awards, or praise, but the joy of creating something meaningful. Music was her heart, her voice, and her way of connecting with the world, and she honored it with every note she played. She also learned the importance of giving back. She began to mentor young musicians, especially those from small towns or difficult circumstances, who struggled to have their talent recognized. She shared not only techniques and compositions, but also the lessons she had learned about patience, resilience, and believing in oneself. She remembered how it had felt to practice in secret, to face doubt and ridicule, and to wonder if anyone would ever listen. Her guidance gave these young musicians encouragement and hope, showing them that their passion was worth pursuing. Through all these experiences, she reflected on her growth. She had started as a quiet girl, unsure if the world would notice her, and had become a musician whose music could move thousands. She realized that the journey had taught her far more than skill. It had taught her courage, empathy, and the importance of staying true to oneself. She understood that success was not measured only by recognition or fame, but by the lives touched, the hearts inspired, and the dreams nurtured. There were moments when she returned to her hometown, walking the familiar streets and visiting the places that had shaped her. She passed the bakery, the narrow streets, and the fields where she had once imagined melodies. These places reminded her of the long journey she had taken, of the small beginnings, and of the courage it had taken to keep moving forward. Each visit was a reminder that no matter how far she traveled, the roots of her passion were still alive, grounding her and keeping her connected to the person she had always been. In one quiet moment, sitting by her old piano in her small room during a rare day at home, she reflected on all that had happened. She thought of the nights spent practicing in secret, the competitions, the performances, and the letters from strangers whose lives had been touched by her music. She remembered the first time she had played in the small room of a friend's house, feeling a connection she could not explain. And now, years later, that connection had only grown stronger, spreading further than she could have ever imagined. She realized that her music had become a gift not only to herself, but to the world. And that thought filled her with quiet joy and gratitude. She also understood the importance of balance. While music was her passion and purpose, she knew that life included more than performances and recognition. She spent time with family, cherished friendships, and appreciated quiet moments of reflection. She walked in parks, watched children play, and listened to the wind rustling through trees. These simple moments reminded her of the beauty in the everyday and inspired her to create melodies that reflected life in all its complexity. Music, she realized, was a way to capture not only extraordinary experiences, but also the subtle, quiet joys that often went unnoticed. Her journey had taught her to embrace both success and failure. There were times when performances did not go as planned, when audiences were distracted, or when critics questioned her choices. She learned to accept these moments without losing confidence, to see them as opportunities to grow, and to return to her music with renewed focus. She discovered that perseverance, humility, and a willingness to keep learning were more important than perfection. Each challenge became a stepping stone, shaping her into a musician and a person who could face the world with courage and grace. As she looked toward the future, she dreamed not only of performing, but also of inspiring others to pursue their passions. She envisioned schools filled with young musicians, towns filled with music, and people finding comfort and joy in melodies created with love and care. She wanted her music to be a reminder that anyone, no matter their background or circumstances, could achieve something meaningful if they remained dedicated and true to themselves. She wanted to leave a legacy not of fame but of connection, courage, and hope. And so she continued to play. Every performance, every note, every melody was an expression of her journey, her heart, and her story. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, doubt, and uncertainty, but she also knew that music had the power to overcome them. It could unite people, heal wounds, and remind them of the beauty and strength within themselves. Her music had become a voice not only for her but for everyone who had ever dreamed, struggled, or hoped for something greater. In the quiet moments, she sometimes reflected on the girl she had once been, the one who practiced in secret, who worried that no one would listen, who longed for a chance to share her music with the world. She smiled at that memory, realizing how far she had come. Every hardship, every doubt, and every small victory had led her to this point. She had discovered not only the power of music, but also the resilience of her own heart. And she understood that the journey itself, the struggles, the triumphs, and the quiet persistence was just as important as the destination. In the end, she knew that her music had the ability to make the world stop, even for a moment, to listen. It could touch hearts, inspire dreams, and create moments of connection that words could never fully capture. And as she played, she felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that she had stayed true to herself, followed her passion, and shared her gift with the world. The girl who had once been overlooked, underestimated, and uncertain had grown into a musician whose melodies carried hope, courage, and beauty across time and space. Her journey would continue, as all journeys do, but she had learned the most important lesson of all. When she played, the world listened, and sometimes when the music was right, the world was changed, even if only a little, by the sound of her heart, and that was enough.